don't do an every other for holidays. That means holidays don't form traditions.
Yes.
Do a I get this holiday every year
Yes.
so that we can form our own traditions on that holiday, and then you can have this holiday every year. So like that's what they did is every year Kristen gets the 4th of July and Christmas Eve.
I love that.
Right? In that way,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, well, usually on Christmas Eve, it's like, no, on Christmas Eve, you're still going to carry on that tradition.
Yes.
And then Jason gets every Thanksgiving. You know, so it's just interesting how, and I say Jason and Kristen, and for those of you that know my brother and that's not them.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, okay.
my best friend and her husband were Jason and Kristen.
Oh.
And so just in case, like,
Jason and Kristen.
well, not anymore.
Oh.
Right. But yeah, that was very confusing for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I first found out they were splitting up and I forgot to like, Jason and Kristen are splitting up and we're friends.
Yeah.
It's very confusing. It's not so confusing anymore, but I love that piece of advice.
That's so great. We did that around Christmas, so Liza would be with Michael every Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. And then we were trying to do the alternating thing on Thanksgiving, so I was supposed to have Liza this year. And I said, you know what, I'd really like to go spend it with Dad, because I know the food's gonna be better.
Well, bless her heart.
I know, and I was like, you know what, that's fine, I want you to be where you wanna be, you know, like, if you're with us and miserable, like, we're not gonna have a good time. And yeah, like, they're right, like, the food was probably better there. So then I was thinking like, I wonder if they should just be with Michael every Thanksgiving, and then, you know, like, it worked out really well. Mary and I did an early meal with her mom, and then a late meal with my family, and like, that was comfy. It was all adults, which was really different, you know, to have no kids in the mix. It was like, and I was the youngest person. So I was like, wait, what? This is very weird.
Did you sit at the kids' table by yourself?
Totally, yeah, it was just me at the bowling table. I was like, do I still get mine now? Yeah, so it is interesting, but it's starting to feel more comfortable, and like every time I'm able to have a conversation with Michael about it, like it just feels better. I'm like, okay, this is, you know, this is how we communicate about these things.
So great.
Right.
Did you see what the projected was?
Oh.
Exactly.
17.6. I thought it might be less 12. If we don't get our 5%, it's.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
I think so too.
It's bananas.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're a little rusty.
Oh, no, are those the twins? They're so cute.
Not the twins. That's
Oh.
one of the twins.
Wow. Okay, well, they're
all
so
set up.
cute.
Yes. They said they'll try and be on good behavior.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
You're 1 minute late. What's going on?
Not according to my iPad.
Clearly we're all very.
5:01 now.
workshop of the Hopkins School Board. We have 2 agenda items this evening. First, we'll be discussing our winter board retreat. And then our second agenda item is our levy update. For community members tuning in, I wanted to make sure that you know that we will have our truth and taxation hearing that will begin at 6 p.m. We'll do a bit of a location change for that. We'll do that in the front of the boardroom or the back of the boardroom, depending on how you think about it. And we welcome community members to join us in person for the truth and taxation hearing if you'd like to give a public comment. And of course, it will be streamed here on the YouTube live stream as well. So let's move into our first agenda item for the workshop, which is our winter board retreat. So this board has been in the practice of doing a retreat together 2 times a year, once in the fall, once in the winter. And this aligns with our professional development goal. So as we were setting our goals at the beginning of this school year, we identified school board professional development as something that we really wanted to focus on. And we have 3 key actions that are underneath that particular goal. School board members will develop a deeper understanding of restorative practices and how they're used throughout the district. We did a board retreat around restorative practices January of 2022. So that's a topic that we began to explore there. We've certainly had multiple conversations at the board table that have deepened our understanding of restorative practices. And of course, we still have a lot to learn just in terms of the ideas behind restorative practices and then how they're implemented throughout the district. Another key action is that we will learn about best and next practices in anti-racist and equitable education locally and nationally, and how we can apply these in Hopkins. And then the third key action is that we will develop a more nuanced understanding of social emotional learning and actions that support scholar mental health. So our January retreat is an opportunity to dig into one of those areas and support our development as board members. Our retreats are posted as workshops, so they are open to the public, of course, in accordance with open meeting law. And tonight we'll just be planning our January retreat. I want to get input from the board so that Rhoda and I can go ahead and start to plan and operationalize that experience. So as I mentioned, last January, the topic of our board retreat was restorative practices. We did a half-day experience here in the boardroom. In August, I helped plan the retreat, and then I was unable to attend because a family member had a health emergency that I had to attend to. So my board colleagues are more familiar with what actually happened that day. But the topic was deepening our knowledge of practices to support our Native American families in our district and the American Indian Education Program that we have here in Hopkins. So just kind of a reminder of some of the topics we've explored before. I think the first thing I'm curious about is if we would like to do a half-day experience again this January, if the board's looking for something a bit longer, like a full-day experience, where we might want to do that, and then, of course, the topic and what the board is really looking to get out of that experience.
Have we picked a date yet?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and ideas of, days that are workable. I think, we are all people with busy schedules, so perhaps a half-day experience is more realistic, and then we can work with Elise to schedule that. But open to your ideas. If you would prefer a full-day experience, we can certainly try to get that scheduled.
Well, for the reason you cited, that we're all busy, I would urge that we do a half-day workshop.
I agree. Unfortunately, I think that we have enough content to fill a full day, though. Just, I think, when hearing those 3 topics that you reiterated about our goals and professional development, I don't think a half day
suffice.
Oh, yeah.
Would it be possible to look at doing like a half day in January and a half day in March? Maybe 2 half days, just because I just don't think a half day is gonna suffice.
Another way of thinking about it is we don't have to cover all of this professional development during the retreats either. We can layer this into our workshop conversations. You know, we can do reading on these topics outside of board meetings, so I don't want you to feel like pressured, like we have to include all of this on the retreat days either.
Yeah, I just think back to that January 2022, our initial introduction to restorative practices, and I think all of us were really enlightened, and frankly, I think that format was really helpful for us, and so I would love that sort of a deep dive. I don't know. I mean, I get it, we're all really busy, but I think that these topics are weighty enough that they might warrant that.
So looking at a half-day experience in January and a half-day experience in March or April?
I mean, even, I think March, just to give
Yeah.
us enough time to really, because then we go on break in June, you know, just to
Yeah.
kind of digest and, I don't know. I'm open to input, but I know that for me personally, that half-day experience was more impactful than what we get in workshops, just based on the format and the time dedicated and the resources we're able to like secure for that type of an engagement.
I think that makes a lot of sense, yeah. So, Rhoda and I were talking a little bit about a potential topic for the January half-day experience, thinking about the conversation we had surrounding student success metrics and, you know, how we are measuring achievement, all of the different data points we're looking at. That was such a rich discussion at our last board meeting. Thinking about doing something along the lines of competency-based personalized learning, having folks from IDL, Innovation Design and Learning, come in and train us up on that so that we really understand the philosophy behind it, how it's being implemented throughout the district. Does that sound like an interesting topic for the January half-day experience, or is there a topic that the board feels is more pressing or something that we would want to get to first before our half-day experience in March, which I think is a great idea?
I like that as a subject, just because it will arm us for our community conversations, which really, I think, happen to be around those success metrics and changing people's perspective on those. And that's really, I think that would be super helpful. So.
And as I look at our board goal around professional development, that aligns with best and next practices in anti-racist and equitable education. So clearly aligned with our board goal as well.
I would also like to see us dive deeper into the mental health piece. And I think that one of the metrics that we're using ties nicely into that as well for a topic of, and I know when they do the statewide,
Minnesota student survey?
yeah, that there's a lot of data for us to use to maybe inform that conversation. And I know there's been an increase in need across our community for mental health supports, but also how is that being embedded into the classroom and how are we measuring it here in Hopkins? I think that we, at least when you go to the report card, you can see that Hopkins School District historically has had a high rating on I feel good going to school. So it'd just be interesting to kind of look at how metrics interplay with the concept of mental health and what we're doing in each classroom to make that more robust and supportive. Because frankly, as a parent, that's one of my top concerns coming out of the distance learning is that mental health piece. And holistic well-being.
There's a clear link to restorative practices in there too. So I'm wondering if, because I think that deserves its own half-day experience, if we're thinking about kind of Katie's point around the ability to do a deep dive. So what would you think about that being the topic for our March half-day experience? And then that could also be an opportunity to continue to deepen our knowledge of restorative practices, kind of picking up on some of the work we did last January.
Yeah, I think that would be good timing too, because I know that, well, at least I'm hoping that the legislature is going to start taking seriously the need for increased funding, and there'll be lots of bills around that. And I think it's a good chance for us as school board members, but also our larger community to advocate for the resources that every school district needs to make these critical changes to education. So that would, yeah, be good timing.
That sounds great. Thoughts on those two topics? So looking at competency-based personalized learning for our January experience, and then mental health practices, making the link to restorative practices, and then with an advocacy component for our March half-day experience.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I would also like, I know that we started a new social emotional learning curriculum this year, and I would love to have that be part of the March one, how that's going, what we're seeing, what kind of outcomes and engagement we're seeing with that curriculum. That would be great.
We can do that in a retreat setting or a workshop update, whatever you feel is most appropriate, but we'd love to share that info with you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think a workshop for that, even sooner than March, would be applicable.
So we have Vice Chair Andreessen and I talked about the meeting that she's going to be chairing in December, and we've added restorative practices as an update for the workshop, so we could maybe follow it in a January workshop. We could then focus on the secondary SEL curriculum.
Sounds great. So now the important part, which is food for the retreat. So what I really want to talk about is timing. Would you like this to be a morning experience or an afternoon experience? Would you like breakfast or lunch or a snack? What does the board prefer?
I'm pretty flexible, so I would leave it more to you and Director Ross, who might have more conflicts professionally.
I thought you were going to say opinions on food, so I didn't know.
No.
Yeah, I'm open to whatever works. I mean, I can make whatever needs to happen. So, like Benihana? No, I'm joking.
I mean, I do love a good breakfast sandwich.
I do too. I make a pretty good one.
Well, maybe we could get Taco Bell to.
Oh yeah, Taco Bell as well. Now we're really getting into it.
You want to specify your order right now?
So we will work. I'll work with Elise on scheduling, and we'll surprise you with the food. Is that the risk you want to take?
Sure.
Okay. And then Rhoda and I will work together on the content for the day, and inviting our IDL team to join us. Anything else we'd like to talk about with the retreat?
Where's it going to be?
Oh, yeah, right. Where are we gonna?
What ski resort is this going to be?
Yes, exactly. Which spa, right? Just kidding for any taxpayers listening. So it will, it will be at a place that is free to us. So thinking about where we might want to hold it. We've done them here. We've done them at the high school.
Have we done Brookview yet?
We did, I think, before you were on the board.
Yeah.
So we haven't been there for a while, so we could look into that.
It's always a good venue.
What about the collaborative workspace on Main Street? Does that
Oh,
still
Olio?
exist? I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, I think, yes, it does. It's Olio, if we're thinking of the same one. We could look into that. We will research some options and then think about, so it will be probably on a day that school is in session, so if we want to do it at a district, Jason likes that, if we want to do it in a district building, thinking about, a space that might be unique, but where we wouldn't be disrupting school. Okay, great, well, we'll do some thinking on that and communicate options out to the board. Okay, well, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is our levy update, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you so much, Chair Westmoreland, and I see our Director of Business Services, Drew Chapanduka, approaching the board table. I was going to say the bench. So back on November 15, at our previous board meeting, the board approved the updated proposed Pay 23 property tax levy, and as Chair Westmoreland mentioned earlier, we'll have our truth and taxation hearing at 6 o'clock. To allow for citizen input. That will be this evening. And we would invite Director Chapanduka to provide any proposed property tax levy changes and updates to our school board at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Mary-Reed. Good evening, respective board members. Actually, I just wanted to take this opportunity for board members to ask any questions they may have in regards to the tax levy. There's been a lot of moving pieces, so I know when we came to the board on November 15th, there were some numbers which had changed on the levy certification, and then I rechecked again in the system. Those numbers reverted back to our previous numbers, so I started liaising with Minnesota Department of Education because a lot of these numbers are formula driven, so it's a calculation which is done in the system. So yesterday, Minnesota Department of Education responded back to me and told me that there were some calculations in their system which were not actually calculating correctly, and they were fixing that. Which actually ended up putting our levy back to where I had reported it on November 15, which is $65.7 million, which is an increase of $6 million, or a 10.2% increase. But again, I just want to make sure that 10.2% increase doesn't mean that 10.2% increase impacting taxpayers. 10.2% increase is increase when you do a comparison from our previous levy, which was $59.7 million in Pay 2022, and it's $65.7 million in Pay 2023. If you translate that, and I know I did attach some documents to the levy memo, if you translate that, when you look at property taxes, so when you look at a property of like $250,000, that's about a 1.7% increase when you do a comparison between Pay 2022 and Pay 2023, which is like $17. So across the system, you will see that the shift in property taxes will be between 1 to about 2.5% increase, with that 10.2 increase across our system. And again, tax levy does impact a lot of the local and county governments. So these resources are shared across different jurisdictions, which sometimes may look like a big pie, but when you just take the portion for the for the school district. That's about 1 to 2% increase. I just wanted to make it clear.
Thank you, Director Chapanduka. I mean, I will admit, before I was elected to a school board, I would receive my tax statement and I would not understand all the nuances of it, right? And so I guess that's one of the benefits of being on a school board and learning about all of this. So I want to say that I do empathize with our community members who find this confusing and they hear 10.2% and that sounds like a lot. And so I appreciate your clarification, and I know that you'll do it during the Truth and Taxation hearing as well, because you always do, to help our community understand that the actual increase is much smaller than that to their property taxes, and that, as you said, there are city taxes, county taxes, and that, you know, we encourage our community to really understand exactly what is coming to the school district, in the interest of transparency, and so we're all on the same page.
Chair Bouchard, Chair Westmoreland,
Yes.
I share your relief that the actual increase that will be experienced by our taxpayers is nowhere near 10%. I saw that number, I thought, we're going to have a pretty wild tax levy hearing on Tuesday night. But then I went to the final page and it shows, you know, property values and estimated increases, and, you know, $33 a year for a $500,000 home, that's not much of a change, you know, 1.7%. So I was relieved to see that. Even on the commercial and industrial side, the numbers are fairly low. So I don't think there's going to be much impact on our tax-paying public for this.
Other questions or comments from my board colleagues just in preparation for the Truth and Taxation hearing? And then, of course, we'll be revisiting this topic at the meeting.
Yes, I do have a question. But did you find that this is in line with our neighboring districts and, you know, attributable to all of the same increases in costs that we see absolutely everywhere these days?
Yes, Director Hartland. It is in line with surrounding metro school districts. I mean, like when you look at Edina, it's kind of same, around 10 to 12%. When you look at Wayzata, 5 to 6%. The one thing different with Hopkins, I mean, we sit in rich commercial real estate with a lot of corporate Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies residing within our boundaries. So that makes our net tax capacity go up, as well as our referendum values. And then when you start to spread that across different property taxes, whether it's residential, commercial, whether it's apartments, then that spreads gets diluted. But when you look at the overall impact, yes, it is pretty much affecting the majority of our surrounding school districts.
Thank you.
Other questions for Director Chapanduka?
No question, Chair Westmoreland, but I was pleased to see that the refinancing that we did lowers the general debt service levy substantially, over $2.5 million worth. So I think we've been financially prudent in taking care of our taxpayers' dollars, and that really, that $2.5 million really limits the amount of increase that our taxpayers will see. So we're good stewards, in my opinion.
That's right. Thank you for reminding us about the refinance. Excellent. Anything else for Director Chapanduka? Well, thank you, Director Chapanduka. We look forward to the main event at 6, and seeing you
Always
back-
interesting.
Yes, seeing you back at the table at 7 for our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tarul.
So the bad news is that I probably could have scheduled this for 5:30. The good news is that we have a nice long break before our truth and taxation hearing. So we look forward to seeing our community members here for that at 6. And board members, let's take a break. Thank you.
I know.
Give it a couple of years, and then it'll.
My youngest.
Hi, bud. Have you been to a school board meeting before? Pretty cool, huh?
One of those top 10 things to do today.
Yeah. I've
So,
got,
yeah.
see all these little, see up there? There's a little thing coming from the ceiling?
Yeah.
There's one here.
See the cameras right there?
That's how we put it on YouTube. You're watching that on YouTube?
You know about
Yeah.
YouTube, right? You know about YouTube,
State gives
right?
us the authority.
It's on TV.
Yeah. He's very thrilled, as you can tell.
Yeah.
County collects the taxes for me. Anything I need to sign?
Good evening. Welcome to our Truth in Taxation public hearing. My name is Jen Westmoreland. I'm chair of the Hopkins School Board, and we'd like to welcome our community members who have joined us here in the room, as well as those who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. Director Chapanduka will give a presentation, and then after that, we'll have time for public comment. I'll come up before that public comment period to read over our public comment guidelines and then invite our community members who have joined us here in the room tonight to share their thoughts with us. I'll turn it over to you, Director Chapanduka. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Good evening, board members. Good evening, community at large and colleagues. My name is Teriro Chapinduka. I'm the Director of Business Services for the district. And tonight I'll be presenting on the public hearing for property tax levy payable in 2023. So, Minnesota state law requires that a public meeting be held between November 25th and December 28th at 6 p.m. or later. This may be part of a regular scheduled meeting. It must allow public comments and may adopt final levy at the same meeting. Tonight, my agenda will be to present the current year budget, the proposed property tax levy, as well as some of the historical components tied to the tax levy and the impact the tax levy has on our property taxes. I'll start with the background information on school funding, the district's budget, the district's proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2023, and then I'll hand everything over to Chair Westmoreland, who will facilitate public comments. Minnesota legislature sets the funding for Minnesota public schools. According to Minnesota Constitution, Article 13, Section 1, uniform systems of public schools. The stability of a Republican form of government depends mainly upon the intelligence of the people. It is the duty of the legislature to establish a general and uniform system of public schools. The legislature shall make sure such provisions, by taxation or otherwise, as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. As a result of that, funding is highly regulated. The state sets formulas which determine revenue, most revenue based on specified amount per pupil, tax policies for local schools, maximum authorized property tax levy. The district can levy less, but no more than amount authorized by the state, unless approved by voters in November. And in September, on September 20th, we came to the board and proposed a levy pre-certification, which was approved by the board at maximum, just to allow us flexibility to be able to make adjustments based on state formulas or any other information we're getting from the state after that levy certification. The state also authorized the school boards to submit referendums for operating and capital needs to voters for approval. And the last referendum the district did for both operating and capital was in November of 2017. So the state sets the basic general education formula, and this formula has been lagging for inflation. If we go back to 2002, 2003, the state general education revenue formula has not kept pace with inflation. For fiscal year 21-22, there was an increase of 2.45% or $161 over the previous year. For fiscal year 22-23, an increase of 2% or $135 over the previous year or over the current year was also approved. Currently, there is no inflationary increases which have been identified by the state. So when we start our budget for fiscal year 23-24, without any additional information from the state, we'll be using our current basic formula allowance, which is that increase of 135, which leaves our basic per student at 6,863. When I look at the next graph, when we start to look at inflationary increases, if we go back to 2002, 2003, and where we are right now, if we were following consumer price index inflation, the district should be receiving $7,983 in basic student allocation, but we are currently only receiving $6,863, which actually leaves us lagging with about $1,100, somewhere around there, to be able to meet the inflationary increases. As you have been, following the market, the economy, there's been a lot of components tied to consumer price index, and the funding we get from the state is not kept pace with those market forces. The other challenge we have in public education is tied to underfunding of special education. MDE reports as of fiscal year 2020, the cost of providing special education programs were underfunded statewide by $673 million. MDE estimates that by fiscal year 2025, cost of providing special education statewide will be underfunded by $806 million. Underfunding of special education costs requires a transfer from regular programs resources to support an underfunded program mandated by state and federal laws. Primary options to bridge special education funding gap are to cut regular program budgets or to increase referendum revenue, and most school districts have done both. So changes in tax levy does not determine changes in budget. And I know sometimes that really gets confused when we start to see some increases in property taxes. For the most part, that doesn't necessarily mean that also determines a change in our budgets. The tax levy is based on main state-determined formulas plus voter-approved referendums. Some increases in tax levies are revenue neutral, and they're offset by reductions in state aid. Expenditure budget is limited by state-set revenue formulas, voter-approved levies, and fund balance. An increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an equal increase in budget. School district levy cycle differs from city count levy cycle. Cities and counties operate on a calendar year. So 2023 taxes provides revenue for 2023 calendar year budget, meaning city and counties operate January to December. On the other hand, school districts use a fiscal year. The budget year begins July 1st, and it coincides with the school year. So 2023 taxes provide revenue for 23-24 school fiscal year. And this budget will be adopted in June of 2023. Because of the approval process for school budgets, lags certification of the tax levy by 6 months, state requires only current year budget information to be presented at this hearing. Fiscal year 23-24 budget will be adopted by school board in June of 2023. Our district's funds include the general fund, food services, community services, building construction, debt service, internal service fund, other post-employment benefits. And all these do have some impact on the property tax levy. Some of the funds are proprietary, meaning are fee generated, and some of them are also driven by our capital plan, which does have an impact on our debt service. The following slide just shows our district revenue and expenditures, and I'll be going deeper into some details as we go down in terms of where we are with our current budget. Like I mentioned, the levy certification we are presenting today will impact our fiscal year 23-24, whose budget will be approved by the board in June, and we are starting to work on identifying the district priorities for that budget. For fiscal year 22-23, our total across all our different funds, our total budget is about 161.4 million, which comprises the majority, or 68%, about $180 million, being our general fund. The remainder being shared between our food services, about $4.1 million, community services, about $9.3 million, building construction, about $21.5 million, debt services, about $16.1 million. So total $161.4 million in revenue. Our general fund revenue, about $118.6 million, is shared across one, our referendum, which is our operating referendum, which carries about 11.7% of that. Location equity, about 4.9%. Capital projects levy, about 9.8%, or $12.6 million. Integration aid, about 1.2%, or a little over $3 million. Compensatory aid, about 2.5%. Our English learners, about 0.3%. Special education, 8.1%. Federal grants and ESSA funds, 5.6%. Extended time, 0.3%. And non-categorical general revenue, about 55.5% of our total revenue to the district. On the expenditure side, the $118.6 million is divided into different components across different programs. So administration is about 4.9%. District support services, 6%. Elementary and secondary regular instruction, about 41.9%. Vocational education instruction, 0.9%. Special education instruction, 14.9%. Instructional support, 6.1%. People support services, 9.7%. Sites and buildings, 10.8%. General fund expenditures, when we break it down by object, 59% of our general fund covers salaries and benefits, which is about $70 million in dollar terms. 22% cover benefits, which amounts to about $26 million. 13% covers purchase services, which amounts to about $50 million. 3% covers supplies, which amounts to a little over $3 million. 1% covers capital expenditures, and 2% cover other expenditures, for a total of about $118.6 million. So for payable 2023 property tax levy, the next slides will deep dive into the determination of the levy, do some comparison of 2022 to 2023 levies, and the reasons for changes in tax levy and the impact on taxpayers. So some background into property tax. Every owner of taxable property pays property taxes to various taxing jurisdictions. That may be the county, the city, township, school district, special districts in which property is located. Each taxing jurisdiction sets their own tax levy, often based on limits in state laws. The county sends bills, collects taxes from property owners, and distributes funds back to other taxing jurisdictions. For the school district, each school district may levy taxes in over 40 different categories. Maximum levy amounts for each category are set by state law and voter approval. The Minnesota Department of Education calculates levy maximums for each school district. School district property taxes. Key steps in processes are summarized in the next slide. And any of these steps may affect taxes on a parcel of property, but district has control only on one of the 7 steps. So the first step is the city or county assessor makes determination on estimated market value for each parcel of property in the county. The second step is legislature sets formulas for tax capacity. For example, for homestead residential property, tax capacity is equals to 1%. These formulas determine how much tax burden will fall on different types of property. The third step is the county auditor calculates tax capacity for each parcel of property in the county based on values from step 1 and tax capacity formulas from step 2, as well as total tax capacity for each school district. Step 4, legislature sets formulas which determine school district levy limits. These are maximum amounts of tax school district can levy in every category. Step 5, Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits for each school district based on formulas approved by legislature in step 4. These limits tell districts exactly amounts that can be levied in every category. School boards adopts a proposed levy in September based on limits set in step 5. After a public hearing, board adopts a final levy in December, which is why we are gathered here today. And the final levy cannot be more than proposed levy except for amounts approved by voters. The last step, the county auditor divides final levy determined by school board by the district's total tax capacity to determine tax rate needed to raise proper levy amounts. Auditor multiplies this tax rate times each property's tax capacity to make a determination on the school tax for that property. So the tax levy calendar starts in September when MDE prepares and distributes the first draft of levy limits reports, setting maximum authorized levy. On September 20th, the school board approved the proposed levy amounts at maximum. In mid-November, the county mailed proposed property tax statements to all property owners. And today, we are holding a public hearing on the proposed levy, which will lead to the board approving the final levy certification. So the proposed property tax levy for 2023 is an increase from 2022 of a little over $6 million, $6,088,996, or 10.2%. The reason for major increases and decreases in levy are actually included in the following slides. So when you look at the overall picture, the levy is divided into three categories. The first category is the general fund, which is divided into different components from transition, location equity, capital projects levy, which is voter approved through the referendum, as well as the operating levy, which is also approved through the referendum, long-term facilities maintenance. So when you look at the overall increase compared to payable 2022, it was an increase of 20.54%. And again, this increase is driven by net tax capacity. Mostly the increases in the value of properties within the Hopkins boundaries. The other component which makes up the tax levy is the community service fund, which is driving some of our community education programs. The overall increase, which was about 108,000, was 7.5%. If you compare what we received in 2022 and what's payable in 2023. The third component is the debt service fund. Debt service fund, when you compare between the two comparisons, 2022 and 2023, it went down by about 15.5% or $2.5 million. So when you start to mix, some of those increases and some of the decreases, it comes out to about 10.2% overall increase, which translates to about $6 million, and total levy being $65,794,907 compared to $59,704,442, which we actually approved in pay 2022. So some of the explanations around the levy changes, there was an increase of about $3.4 million in voter-approved operating referendum. And this levy is based on voter approval to the tax rates, which actually was last approved in November of 2017. And the reason why there was this increase is actually attributed to the district tax base increasing. So when properties bases increase in Hopkins boundaries, which affect Hopkins public schools, that tends to also translate to an increase to our operating referendum. The second major change on the increases was the voter-approved capital projects technology levy. It went up by about $264,443. And the use for this fund is to support technology costs at Hopkins Public Schools. Again, this levy is based on voter-approved tax rates, which are determined by the net tax capacity, meaning if property basis increase in Hopkins, this also translates to an increase to this fund. And our net tax capacity also increased. The third category we saw some increases was a combination of factors within our general and debt service funds. Our long-term facility maintenance, which support our deferred maintenance in our schools when we try to keep our buildings up to standard, maintaining the operations of our buildings. That category saw an increase of about $4.5 million based on the capital plan on projects which were approved by Minnesota Department of Education Commissioner. At the same time, just because of the fact that we've done a refunding of our bond, there was also significant decreases in our debt services. So there was a decrease of about $342,000 tied to our debt service voter approved, and a decrease of about $2.2 million tied to our LTFM debt service, which is part of the payments we pay for our principal and interest for the bonds the district sell. So there was a net decrease on our debt service of about $2.5 million. Since the district is eligible for the long-term facility maintenance revenue, and this is based on the projects which have been approved by the state, and our LTFM projects are actually financed by a combination of our annual general fund levies as well as our bond issue. So when we try to structure our debt, we try to combine a component of our general fund, which is what we call pay-as-you-go, as well as when we sell bonds, so that at least we don't end up with more debt in our system than we can afford to service. And then all these levies are coordinated with other capital and debt levies to maintain an optimal structure for property taxes, just keeping in mind that, you know, the more debt we carry, the more burden we put on our taxpayers, and we try to balance those components. So there are many factors which can cause tax bills for an individual property to increase or decrease from year to year. This can include changes in value of individual properties, changes in total value of all property in the district, increases or decreases in levy amounts caused by changes in state funding formulas, local needs and costs, voter-approved referendums, and other factors. So it's a myriad of different factors which come at play when we start to look at an increase or decrease on a property. Also putting into consideration the different jurisdictions which are actually covered by each property tax base. So the next slide will show some comparisons in terms of what a 10.2% increase or $6 million increase to the property tax base might mean for a property owner in our system, and what that may translate for properties in Hopkins, City of Hopkins and Hopkins School District. And these are estimates, so they might not probably reflect dollar per dollar comparison when you start to look at your property tax statement, but they do give us at least a better overview of what this might mean across different market value and estimates when you start to compare the actual taxes payable in 22 and the estimated proposed for 2023. And I'm just going to give two examples. One for a property valued at about $250,000. If you do a comparison between what probably was paid for payable 2022 and what will be payable in 2023, that's an increase of about $17, which translates to about a 1.7% increase. And then you do the same for a $500,000 property. If you compare what was paid for the actual in payable 22 and what will be payable in 2023 based on the proposed tax levy, that again translates to about $33 or 1.7% increase. And same for commercial properties. A property valued at $250,000 will see about a $16 increase when you compare between the 2 years, or 1.5% increase. Property worth $2 million will see an increase of about $114 or 1.2% increase. So that being said, those are the actual impacts the proposed tax levy will have across, different property bases within the Hopkins boundaries. There are other components which are at play. I mean, again, the graph you see is just kind of showing, some of those increases over a number of years, which are pretty much kind of close to flat with some fluctuations, which are usually determined by how strong the property base is, the net tax capacity in our district looks like. There are other components which come to play. Can you go to the next slide? Next one. When it comes to property taxes, there are certain credits which can be afforded to homeowners per Minnesota Department of Revenue requirements. There's the Minnesota Homestead Credit Refund, which is also called the circuit breaker. And this has been in existence since the 1970s, and it is available each year to homeowners of homestead property, which applies to taxes paid on a house, garage, and 1 acre for agricultural homestead property. The annual income for the homeowner must be approximately $119,790 or less, and it operates on a sliding scale, and meaning the refund is based on income and total property taxes, and the maximum refund for homeowners is about $2,840, and this is also available to renters. If you want more information, you can go to the Minnesota Department of Revenue website and look for Form M-1PR if you feel like you are eligible for this credit. There are also other Minnesota special property tax refunds, which are available each year to owners of homesteads with a gross tax increase at least of 12% and over 100 over prior year. And this is usually very helpful in the first year after a referendum, since we have noted a referendum since 2017. This might not probably, impact a lot of people. The refund for this is about 60% of the amount by which tax increase exceeds or is greater than 12%, up to a maximum of $1,000. Again, more information can be found in the Minnesota Department of Revenue by completing Form 1-M-1 PR. There are also other tax benefits for senior citizens. There's the Senior Citizen Property Tax Deferral, which allows people age 65 and older with household income of $60,000 or less to defer a portion of property taxes on homes. They must have lived in the home and on the home or homestead for the last 15 years. It limits maximum amounts of property tax paid to 3% of household income. Additional taxes are also deferred and not forgiven. It also provides predictability, amount of tax paid, which will not change while participating in the program. Deferred property taxes plus accrued interest must be paid when the home is sold or the homeowner dies. This concludes the public hearing. I will hand over the podium to Chair Westmoreland, and we'll hear public comments and continue with the program.
Thank you very much, Director Chapanduka. So I've received 2 public comment cards this evening, and I will invite our community members up shortly to share their thoughts with us. I first wanted to read through some guidelines for public comment. We are grateful that you're here to share your thoughts with us. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is for input only. If you have left which means that we will not have a dialogue about your public comment this evening during this session, you are welcome to tune in to the school board meeting, which begins at 7, where we will be discussing the levy. If you have left your contact information on the comment card, a district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. I will recognize 1 speaker at a time. Only those speakers who are recognized will be permitted to speak. Individuals who interfere with or interrupt speakers, the board, or the proceedings may be asked to leave. Personal attacks on any individual, including any other speaker during the public comment session, are unacceptable, as are obscenities and profanity. Persistence in making such remarks will end the individual's opportunity to address the board and may result in the individual being directed to leave. I will rule out of order any statement that would violate state or federal law, school board policy, or the privacy rights of an individual. Minnesota's open meeting law prohibits the discussion of private educational data during an open meeting. Accordingly, during the public comment section, no person may discuss identifiable private educational data on an identifiable student. The open meeting law also requires the board to close a meeting for preliminary consideration of allegations against an employee. So community members who have concerns about an employee or want to file a complaint against an employee are encouraged to contact the superintendent directly. Community members will have an opportunity to be heard within the limits of the law and subject to the time, place, and manner restrictions above. Thank you for being here to participate in public comment this evening. So first, I'd like to welcome Jim Betchold up for his 3-minute public comment period. Welcome, Jim.
2 years, I made a stop here to make a presentation. The issue is referendum. And I've listened to the budget when I could. I'm hard of hearing, so I hear probably 40% of what's said. But I didn't hear anything about the referendum and how it's put into the budget. The people from the public here, I'm going to ask a question. Do you know that over 25% of the students do not live in our district? Are you aware of that? Anybody aware of that here? Okay. The school district was created way back when to educate the kids of Hopkins School District. In fact, the board is only made up of individuals living in the school district. Yet 25% of our students or more come from outside the district. We pay a referendum. My son lives in Osseo. His kids went to Osseo School District. His neighbor told him, my 2 kids go to Hopkins. I take them down there in the morning when I go to work in Bloomington and pick them up. Do they pay a referendum to Hopkins? No. In fact, he bragged to my son that he votes no for the referendum in Osseo because it saves him money. 2 years ago, I asked the same kind of questions, and the response was the state of Minnesota requires us to do it. I checked on that because that's all I was told. Well, the rules from the state of Minnesota says you can apply if you allow 1% from outside the district enroll based on your student enrollment in the district. So I'm paying money, you're paying money to educate a kid in Osseo or Waconia or somewhere else. You can manage it. The budget, 25% of the budget is on these kids. The state pays their part, and they're going to pay more next year because we've got a total DFL legislature. So you'll have more money, but we'll still be paying referendum. What I disagree with the school board and the staff is when you went out for the referendums, no
About
one,
10 seconds remaining.
pardon?
10 seconds remaining on your
Okay,
time, sir.
no one told the people that you were paying for students outside the district. You want to save money, go down to the 1%, comply with the law.
Thank you very much, Jim. Next, I'd like to invite Vic Harvath up. Oh, sure. Yes, would you like to use this microphone?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll turn this one off.
That helps. I will say it's a little bit hard to see those screens from there. Can anybody verify that? I'm sitting right here in the second row, and my hearing's good, and my eyesight's good. So you ought to have something here that everybody could see and hear. Okay? It's very hard to understand, and it's very hard to see what's going on. So don't count my time yet, okay? First of all, I'd like to say the Hopkins School District increased by, as he said, by 10.2%. You get from Hennepin County roughly 26% of that comes from them. About 63%, I think, of Hopkins are people that are renting. I don't know if you realize that. The affordable housing is the majority of those people that are renting. The affordable housing in the last 2 years has gone up a little over 14%. Almost everybody that I know on 11th and 10th Avenue South, almost about 1,000 people in there are all in the affordable housing. And I've seen taxes going up there, which is really, really crazy. My son bought a place and lives there on 11th Avenue, and he has to work 2 jobs. I manage 3 units over there. And every single one of them works 2 jobs. He's hardly home with his 1 child and the wife. And the one of the others, she has 2 kids, and she says she has a hard time making her her budgets every single month. And that's what's happening. Taxes are going up. I just just look at one thing here. You had an increase of building construction. Big, big increase there. You don't have to be putting a lot of money into increases in building when everybody else is being held down right now. That's the time to hold back on some of those things. When we see the increases in rent, that has to be, and the ones I manage, they want that passed on to the people that are renting. Okay? They might not like it,
10 seconds remaining.
but that has to be done or they're going to go out of business. That is going up roughly 14 to 15%.
Thank you very much, Vic.
Okay, one other thing I'd like to say, and I'd like everybody to take and look at this. It's maskoffmn.org. And you will see how the school board has
Thank you. Thank you very much.
has held down our kids and parents because of.
Thank you. This concludes our public hearing, our truth and taxation hearing. We'd like to thank our community members who joined us here in the room and also via the YouTube live stream. We invite you to join us for our school board meeting, which will begin at 7 p.m. Thank you. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:02 PM. Good evening. We'd like to welcome our community members who have joined us here in the boardroom and those who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. As has been our practice since the beginning of the school year, we are going to go around the table and introduce ourselves so you know who you're listening to this evening. So we'll start with Director Hartland, end with Director Ross, and then our fabulous student board rep will introduce herself during her report. So Director Hartland, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in to watch the meeting, both in person and later. I am Director Rachel Hartland. One of these days, I'm going to stop introducing myself as one of the newer board members, but that night is not tonight. But we are coming up on our 1 year of involvement for myself and Director Ross, and it has been very exciting. I am a parent of Hopkins scholars in Meadowbrook and in North Junior High, and am excited to see that there are people here to talk about taxes tonight.
Hi, my name is Katie O'Shea Peterson. I have a 5th and a 6th grader at Meadowbrook, and appreciate seeing all of you here tonight.
Steve Adams. I'm in my, starting my 12th year on the school board and have been a resident of the district for 37 years and have 2 grown children who are graduates of Hopkins High School.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Marie Perry Reed, Superintendent. I have a 5th grader at Eisenhower, a 9th grader at North, and my husband has a son who is a kindergarten para at Eisenhower.
I'm Jen Westmoreland. I currently serve as board chair. I'm in the middle of my 2nd term on the school board, and I'm a proud graduate of Hopkins schools and a proud parent of a Hopkins scholar who is at Eisenhower Jingjing Elementary.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen, and I am a parent of 2 students here in the district. Well, actually, one has moved on to the U of M, recent graduate, and a 9th grader who attends West Junior High. And I'm happy to see all of you here tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Khan. I'm one of the directors here, and I previously worked in the Hopkins School District, specifically as the media para at the high school for about 5.5 years. My kids both graduated from Hopkins School District, and they are both at the University of Minnesota. I specifically chose Hopkins because of its academic excellence and amazing diversity. I really love Hopkins, and I'm so grateful that my kids got to go here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Ross. Just like Director Hartland had communicated, I'm one of the other newest board members. I have 3 children who attend Tanglin Elementary. There will be 2 twins, so 2 4th graders, 1 kindergartner. Actually, whoops, I messed that up. He's in 1st grade, so I'll get in trouble tonight when I go home, forgetting that he's in 1st grade now. Yeah, that's me.
I'm impressed that your 1st grader is watching the school board meeting and is going to give you a hard time.
He loves his civic duty, so.
Like his dad. That's fantastic. Thank you. So our next agenda item is public comment for items on the agenda. I did not receive any public comment cards this evening, so will not be inviting anyone up to the table. Wanted to remind our community that you can give public comment to the school board by leaving a voicemail that we play publicly during the appropriate public comment period. So public comment for items on the agenda happens at the beginning of the meeting, and for items not on the agenda happens at the end. We did not receive any voicemails this evening. The other option is to attend the meeting in person, fill out a public comment card in the back of the room, and hand it to me before the meeting begins. Next, we'll move on to our reports, and we have one of our fabulous student board representatives, Grace Riley, at the table with us tonight, and I will turn it over to her.
All right. So like Chair Westmoreland said, I'm Grace. I am one of the junior representatives for the Hopkins High School School Board Student Board Program. And I'm here with some updates for you guys about all things high school at Hopkins. So with term 2 well underway, winter break coming soon, Hopkins is abuzz with tons of things ending and a ton of new exciting things beginning. So some things that unfortunately are ending are all of our fall sports. To touch on that, dance team has begun their long road to state. Junior captains Cameron McNeil and Jazara Hall are looking out for the best of the best on their team to take over the captain spots next year. And junior Patrick Kubisa is our wrestling 2-time Fridley Invitational champion for the 160 weight class, which was a title that he earned this past weekend, so congrats to him. And then some other things that are beginning this year are we had information sessions and question sessions, I want to say around mid-November, possibly very early December, about potential AP Black History classes that should, fingers crossed, be coming to Hopkins either this year or potentially next year. So that's pretty exciting. And then PSAT scores were released yesterday over email for our entire junior class. All those that opted in to take it this year have now gotten their scores back and kind of had time to start digesting whatever that means for them. And then I just received a lovely bag full of chapstick for our Health and Needs campaign. From one of our lovely community members who's in the audience. And she actually informed me that Clorox owns Burt's Bees, something I did not know, so that's kind of cool.
Transparency.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so our Health and Needs campaign has been going on for about 2 to 3 weeks now, and it is run by Miss Ali and some of her colleagues. And she kind of sent out a whole list to our student council, I believe, who then put it in like a fun little infographic to share with us about different things. Most of it is for like personal health and like personal care that we are donating to, I believe it is a women's shelter. Okay, I'm getting some nods, okay.
I think so.
Good. And then I have a couple teacher spotlights that I wanted to share with you guys quick. These 2 teachers are just kind of people that the junior class as a whole wants to recognize for a couple different reasons, very different reasons for both of them. But to start off, we have Mr. Shank, who works in the science department at the high school. He teaches physics and will go on to teach AP physics later this year. And he has piloted a new method of test taking, or more accurately, a lack thereof. Mr. Shank's new model of teaching a unit doesn't necessarily include a large test at the end. He simply outlines the standards that need to be met within the unit and gives students 2 to 4 opportunities to test out of any particular standard. You have to prove that you know what you're talking about and understand the concept before he signs off that you can take it off of your test. But once you prove you've got it, all questions regarding that standard are taken off of your final unit test, and ideally, you have no final test at the end of the unit at all. As someone who is currently in Shank's physics class second block, this new way of test taking has been extremely popular with his students. And honestly, it takes a huge load off of that big, like incredibly daunting end of unit, end all be all test. So that's pretty cool. And then another teacher to highlight is Mr. Kendall, and he works with an after-school program and has reintroduced an inviting learning environment for his students. He is located in the East Wing, and his interior design degree really helped him like renovate this entire classroom. It's pretty cool to see. He has taken on the majority of a flex space environment and made it more personal to the students that he teaches. Mr. Kendall has a large focus on mental health for the students that he sees on a day-to-day basis, And that is why he kind of redesigned the way he did. So essentially, like when you go into his room, it's more like large tables with collaborative, like the chairs, the desks, and like the little like spinny stools, for lack of a better term for them. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see like a smaller flex space-esque area. It's kind of fun. And then, speaking of mental health, last year we had year-long wellness center passes that you could go to the front office and like sign up for. And essentially what those did was for students that either like needed a mental health break throughout the day or just kind of wanted one-on-one time to be by themselves. They could show the pass to their teacher, and then their teacher, depending on the lesson for the day, would either excuse them or not excuse them to be able to go and just kind of do what they need to do on a personal level. And unfortunately, those are no longer available this year. The students were not really told why, and when asked about it, we kind of were, I don't want to say brushed off, because that would be the wrong word, but kind of told that that was just the way it was now. So that wasn't exactly comforting by any means. But yeah, so that's kind of the only downside that I have in this report, which is why I'm ending with it. But yeah, kind of a sad sight to see them go. And that is all for I have. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you so much, Grace. I love the idea of the teacher spotlight, and I hope both of them are either watching or have a chance to watch the video. As a teacher, I know how meaningful and humbling it is when a student recognizes the work that we're trying to do to make learning more engaging and accessible and inclusive, and it sounds like both of those teachers are striving toward those things, and you really made a lot of these concepts that we talk about at the board table around how we're redefining education, you really made that come alive in your report, so appreciated that.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions for Grace?
Just had a quick question about the Wellness Center pass. I think I remember some of the feedback that we got around student access to the wellness centers was about that having it be more accessible throughout the day to students. So I'm wondering, was there any communication given around ways in which those could be more useful and student-driven?
Honestly, I would love to say that there were, but unfortunately, we were like quite literally just told that the passes themselves were no longer an option. And then if you want to go into the wellness center now, you obviously, like, you still can, but you'll just need like a pass day to day from whatever teacher you have. So it's, unfortunately, seems like it's a lot more restricted.
So my understanding is it would be more like a teacher-based pass
Yes.
instead of kind of something that's understood and known between all staff and the student.
Yeah, now it's more like the pass that you get like when you need to go to the bathroom.
Yep.
So
Okay,
not the best.
thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Grace, do students have to explain where they're going, or do they just get a pass that excuses them for 2 or 4 or 5 minutes?
So I guess, do you mean like with the passes in general or like specifically? Yeah, so
Where they
do
could
have
go to the
say-
bathroom or stop into the wellness center, and then maybe there's an opportunity to, I don't know, have a conversation and potentially stay for longer?
Yeah, so passes can be like for any place in the school for any amount of time. But you do have to specify like with whatever staff member you're talking to or like getting the pass from, like, here's where I'm going. Not necessarily like when you'll be back, but like obviously you're not going to spend like 30 minutes in the bathroom. So they kind of have a time expectancy of you within that regard.
Yeah. Well, it's really helpful to hear that. I can confirm, as I always try to remind our school board and also our scholar reps, that our high school principal listens in, especially to the board reports. So I'm hoping that there's an opportunity for some massaging of what is a method that would be widely accepted by students for them to access the Wellness Center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Grace. Anything else for Grace? Great, we'll move ahead to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Puri-Reed.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to Elise for sharing the deck here. So this is, believe it or not, the last 5-day school week we have with students. I'm always struck by how much time has passed in the school year and also how quickly it passes. So we're nearly to our winter break, and I'm very thankful for our teachers and school staff who I know will find many ways to maximize learning in the coming days before break. Having just come from Thanksgiving break, there were quite a few meaningful activities for parents, students, and community members. Bye, Grace. To gather and focus on gratitude. For example, the family engagement specialist at Gatewood, Jessica Winnie, hosted a candle making activity for families that was well attended and really loved by participants. In another Hopkins space, our American Indian Education Program, led by Annie Pfau, hosted an indigenous food preparation class for our Native American Hopkins students. So there are many examples of experiences that were facilitated right around Thanksgiving break so that students and families and staff could come together and be in a space where they could enjoy one another. So I wanted to just provide a couple of spotlights on learning and achievement in Hopkins. We focus a great deal on explicit writing instruction at all grade levels, especially in elementary, to build those foundational skills. In 4th grade, there are heavy doses of skill development with personal narrative, creative writing, nonfiction writing, and also with poetry. So I wanted you to check out this poem that was written by Meadowbrook 4th grader Ben Kunkel. The Dream of Peace, which is the name of his poem, The Dream of Peace won the Lillian Wright Award out of nearly 5,000 submissions.
Wow.
And so I read the poem. I thought it was absolutely lovely. Hold on to peace, for it is a life lesson. It is the birds in the flowers. It is the calm and the quiet. It is the wall blocking the tears. It has more power than the fear of the hurricane. Peace is all the building blocks of earth and the whole of life. 4th grade. So congratulations to Ben, and thank you to Ben's teachers and really all teachers who help our students develop these powerful skills. I'd also like to showcase learning and achievement of our high school scholars. So each term, the academic departments at the high school select 1 to 2 students who exemplify scholarly skill or mindsets. And so on the screen, you'll see the names and faces of the scholars who are being celebrated. Briefly, as a collective, some of the personal attributes and academic behaviors that teachers used to describe these scholars included things like great leadership, strong learning orientation, improved writing, peer tutoring, demonstrating a great attitude, expert discussion leader, masterful conceptual understanding, something that we're really working on in Hopkins, significant personal effort, and you can go to the next slide, Elise, asks lots of questions, and then coming in specifically from Mr. Sabin, who teaches, he's a technology teacher at our high school. He teaches construction to our differently abled students. He shared that our Compass cohort was exceptional at demonstrating their ability to use power tools in a safe way. So I want to congratulate all of our Term 1 Academic Award winners. Now, those were some of our high school and elementary student scholarly achievements. We also have an art scholar on our school board. So this is Director Khan's work, Tanya Khan. It was recently showcased at the Dunn Brothers Coffee Shop on Shady Oak. Ms. Khan, Director Khan, specializes in paper art, which some of the paper you paint yourself first.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then I sculpt it into different forms, and I just love making paper flowers especially. So yeah, thank you.
You can see how intricate and beautiful this art is. Congratulations, it's beautiful.
Thanks.
Regarding our scholar musicianship, I wanted to give our school board and listening parents and audience members a preview of upcoming concerts that we should most definitely support. So yesterday, our Northwest and High School choirs performed their winter showcase concert at the high school. The 7th and 8th grade band concert will be held December 8 at West. The high school's wind ensemble, along with 6th and 9th grade bands, will be held at Hopkins High School on December 13, and then on December 14, we can attend the symphonic band combined with West Junior High's 9th grade band. And then on January 10, the 5th and 6th grade band and orchestra concert will be held at the high school, but I believe that's a school board night, so we'll have to have some of you attend on all of our behalf. So really wonderful events coming up that we can attend and support. And then finally, just in closing, I'd love to show a video that was part of a WCCO news story from last night, and pleasantly and ironically, we have a few members of the Glen Lake community in our audience, so welcome to you. This video showcases the efforts of students and staff at Glen Lake who are attempting to raise $300,000 for an accessible playground that would be available and accessible to students of all abilities, including students in wheelchairs. So we're very grateful to our Hopkins Education Foundation for providing a great start to this effort. They recently donated $35,000, and under the spirited guidance of Betsy Julian and Principal Jeff Radel, students and staff are doing a really amazing job educating our community about this need, and I know we're all excited to support this campaign. So we'll show that video at this time. Should I play it from here, Elise? Or Steve? Okay. Thank you.
Do we need to switch it on here?
I think it's behind.
Beg pardon, there's now a good time for a jolly bit of window cracking. Here, as I can tell, chestnuts don't talk.
Geico, your claims team is here for you 24/7.
Some West Metro kids are on a mission to provide fun for all.
Susan Elizabeth Littlefield shows us how some Hopkins elementary students are going to great lengths to even the playing field.
At Glen Lake Elementary, the mission is spelled out. They want an accessible playground, and they want it bad.
The merry-go-round and the swings.
The students and staff are going to great lengths to make the $300,000 dream come true.
We'll go on the right side of the street first.
They are door knocking and cold calling, and it's a shared mission.
You do not use a wheelchair.
Nope.
Why is it so important for you to have this playground here?
It's important for me to have this playground here so people in wheelchairs can have fun too.
Because the current setup leaves some out.
I get this feeling of setback, or like I'm not being able to do what I'm capable of doing. So I'm really excited about this new equipment.
Felix and Hyatt are too.
I'm excited to spin on the merry-go-round.
Oh, that'll be fun.
I'm excited to swing on this swing.
Something as simple as joining your friends on the swing and having a shared experience at the same time, it's going to be the great equalizer. We're very excited about it.
8 kids at the school use wheelchairs.
Thank you so much.
But the whole school is making sure they can all use the playground.
What does it mean to you seeing these other kids who are working so hard?
I appreciate these people very much because they went out of their way just to help people that feel different every day.
They just met their first goal, $35,000 for a merry-go-round. A step closer to a playground for everybody and every soul.
I feel very loved.
In Hopkins, Susan Elizabeth Littlefield, WCCO 4 News.
If this dream comes true and the playground project gets funded, it will be open to anyone in the area who wants to come play. If you'd like to learn about the project, we do have a link on WCCO.com.
CCO, always. CBS News Minnesota, powered by WCCO. Get closer to breaking news and weather live as it happens. Stream the local news you trust.
Oh my goodness, sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Mary Peary-Reed. I think the work that the Glen Lake community is doing is absolutely inspiring. And it makes me think about how important it is for our schools to be fully funded, because accessible playgrounds that allow all of our community members to participate in fun and physical activity and community and connection building should not be dependent on fundraising. These are things that should be funded by the state legislature, that should be funded by our federal government that has not kept its promise to fully fund special education. And so while we absolutely celebrate the work that is happening at Glen Lake, we too have to address the structural issues behind it that make for these realities where we have to fundraise in order to have spaces that are truly accessible and inclusive. So thank you very much.
Well said. Thank you, Chair Westmoreland.
Other comments or questions for Dr. Mary Peary-Reed? Next, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion?
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I just wanted to draw attention to our community members of something that is in the consent calendar that came up at our Truth and Taxation hearing. Section F is the annual resolution limiting non-resident enrollment. I think if anyone has questions about that, that's a really great place to start as to what Hopkins policy is and how it interacts with state law.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. I was going over the checks since yesterday, and noted some expenses of note. $71,400 to Lexia Learning Systems for the Core 5 Reading Unlimited license. I'm assuming this is to be used by students throughout the district to improve their reading.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you know what grades?
Ann does.
Elementary school.
K-6.
Okay, good. We paid $13,289 to North Hennepin Community College for fall tuition, sparing our resident parents that expense. $650 to Guthrie Theater for a performance of The Christmas Carol on December 14th, so coming up. $1,200 for a baritone sax for the high school band. One of the bigger expenses this month was numerous payments for substitute teachers and other substitutes. We were just getting hit with COVID and flu, and numerous teachers were out, and so we've had to pay a substantial amount for substitutes for that period. Over $11,000 was paid out to booster clubs for concession stand payouts. One of the ways that most of our booster clubs are able to raise money is by staffing the concession stand at various athletic events, and it generates a substantial amount of funds for those booster clubs, so $11,000 there. $870 to the Minnesota Historical Society for the Glen Lake 5th and 6th grade field trip to Fort Snelling. And some things come up in our expenses that are always surprising. And the one this month was $370 for the wrestling scale calibration at the high school. I didn't know we had a wrestling scale.
I'm sure it's required.
I'm sure it is. So anyway, with that, I move that we approve total disbursements of $2,611, $929.85 for the period of November 9, 2022 through November 29, 2022.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to new business. Our first agenda item is policies and first read. I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen and welcome Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to the table.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Before the board this evening are policies in first read that have been reviewed by the Policy and Monitoring Committee, and there are not substantial changes to most of them. And I will turn it over to Superintendent Nick Lightfoot to walk us through each one individually.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. You do have those policies that were mentioned in front of you as part of the first read packet. We'll go through these three that are in front of you this evening. The first is related to enrollment of non-resident student. It's policy 509, specific here. One of the changes that was made was to make sure that we included that open enrollment application, had a link to that as it is required by the Minnesota Department of Education that we do use that as part of our open enrollment process. So with that, as you will note, there were no other specific changes beyond that that were related. We also included the Minnesota School Board Association model policy for your review as well. You will note in that model policy that there have been no other significant recommended changes since 2017. If there are questions on that, I'm happy to address those at this time.
Any questions or comments on 509?
Chair Westmoreland, Dr. Lightfoot, in the public hearing, it came up that, well, it was mentioned by one of the speakers that there's some ability for us to limit open enrollment to 1% of our student population.
The lesser of, yes, you can set some of those limitations. As was noted in Director Andreessen's comments as well on the consent agenda, you do note that the board did adopt a resolution which allows us to look at that number in a specific capacity. So for example, if there are specific limitations on grades and grade levels, we can look at that given that resolution. But our practice and our policy has been that we do remain open for interested individuals up to those limitations.
Do you know what percent of our student population open enrolls?
It's an excellent question, and at the next board meeting, you will have the detailed information of not only how many open enroll in, but also how many open enroll out. As you will note, just to give you a little preview, what does happen with that is that we have seen continual increases in both of those consistently throughout the previous years, and you will see that again as a consistent factor when we take a look at that either on the 20th or the first meeting in January. So we'll have the upcoming specifics with the latest information for you.
Well, I know that open enrollment has been popular across the state, and it's become a way of life ever since it was passed back in the 90s, I think it was. So I personally think it's good to give parents choices, and that's one of them that is provided to them.
Excellent. Anything further on 509? Great, I think we can move on to 530.
All right, 530 is the policy on immunizations. As you will note, there has been no change to that. As I had mentioned before, the model policy for this as well, no significant revisions since 2017, so no recommended changes specifically at this time.
Questions or comments from my board colleagues? Okay, I think we can move on to 531.
All right. Policy 531 is reflective of state statute and is the Pledge of Allegiance policy. You will see and you will note that that policy had no recommended changes coming forth from the monitoring committee, and you will note that this policy dates back to 2003 and has had no significant modifications or changes from the model policy as such. So with that, would stand open for questions or comments regarding the Pledge of Allegiance policy.
I had a question regarding the flag component. So there's the component of the policy that deals with the pledge, and then there's a separate component that deals with the flag. One could obviously argue that those are connected concepts, so it does make sense to house them in the same policy. Wondering if you could kind of explain the statutory components when it comes to the flag and how that language is encoded in policy.
Yep, the policy itself is based off Minnesota statute. Minnesota statute does require that flags be displayed in all classrooms and as well outside the building. So specifically, that is a requirement. There's also a requirement that obligates the district to proper storage of those as well. So That is, in essence, the requirement that follows the flag. The policy reflects the statutory language that is related to the Pledge of Allegiance, and that is a specific language that is framed in all the sections of the policy to reflect the requirements around that.
Thank you. I'm curious as well about the practice around opt-out policy, the opt-out inclusion in the policy. I've had conversations with students, parents, really about the weight of the pledge historically, given the histories of genocide, colonization, slavery, the fact that our current criminal legal system does not indeed provide liberty and justice for all in its current iteration and past iterations. And I'm wondering how we account for this in practice, especially when the act of opting out could serve to further marginalize students who already feel marginalized in our spaces. And so what is an inclusive and equitable way that we can address some of these realities, instead of just like ignoring the discomfort around the pledge, right? Addressing some of these realities in a way that educates. And not creating this, I'm gonna frame it in positive language, creating an equitable opt-out experience for students in our spaces. I'm wondering if we could get a better idea of just like what that looks like or could look like.
I wasn't at the conversation that we had with elementary principals, so we could maybe revisit that and meet with them again. But I think that what we should think about are ways that students can have the experience that represents their personal choice, the choice of their family, in a way where they don't feel isolated or marginalized in the classroom. And maybe it's not a binary option, like you're either standing for the pledge or you're not. Maybe there are, 3 or 4 rotations or centers, and one is the Pledge of Allegiance, and another is, books about the United States flag, and another is books about other flags. And these are just very simple examples. But I do wonder if we might have conversations with our principals, and I think our classroom teachers would be able to really give some great insights into the current culture in our elementary classrooms around the Pledge of Allegiance and where students are at, especially if it's not these sort of binary choices, and then what some options might be. Because as far as my understanding, these are more recent conversations we've been having, correct? Or have we always had these conversations about whether to recite or not?
Couple pieces of information, and I think, yes, from the standpoint of the policy and practice is looking at, yes, the pledge is required under statute unless the board chooses to waive that requirement on an annual basis. And as such, that is required once a week, that there be a presentation of the opportunity to choose to recite the pledge, and the specific information is either A or B in the statement of policy, either by an individual classroom teacher or over the school intercom. So both of those options at different points in time and different ways that buildings have chosen to implement that have been the requirement of the policy through the course of the way that we have delivered this. I think to the question of the opt-out, the statute and the policy also identify that individuals should have and do have the election, the personal election, not to do so. And there is this specific language that students and school personnel must respect another person's right to make that choice. So we have always honored that and always tried to provide such an opportunity within the space when the pledge is being offered to our scholars. I think part of the discussion that the monitoring committee had, and members can speak to that as well, was what does this look like in a space where individuals are making the choice, and how do we make sure that we are mindful of that respect and how do we make sure that that experience doesn't become any type of negative experience for an individual in making that personal choice. I think that's really the deeper kind of conversation that's in front of us, and how do we make that an equitable space, and what kinds of structures and strategies can we look at. The other element that's part of the statute is that should the board waive the requirement, and I think that's the key component, is that what you're waiving as a board is waiving the requirement, that you then also have the ability to draft additional policy. So if there is a way that you want to recreate that requirement, as a board, the statute gives you the authority to do so in looking at an additional way of coming forth with a policy that might look toward that in a different manner.
Thank you. Vice Chair Andreessen, you were leaning forward. So.
Well, I just wanted to say we did have this discussion in the monitoring committee space, and really thought about what you were bringing up, Chair Westmoreland, around what is our practice in Hopkins Public Schools, and it does vary from school to school. And I think that that is something that, as a district, we have really been trying to hit the right balance of giving each school their own agency and identity, as well as trying to be consistent across the district about things that that are appropriate to do so. So that was part of the discussion as well. And I think too that one of the things that we were conscious of as we were having this discussion in committee was that there's policy where we have the space in which to make some change, and then there's practice, which is I think what you were speaking to, Chair Westmoreland. So it could be that perhaps the board wants to have more of an in-depth discussion about policy, and we could maybe find space to do that. But the monitoring committee thought the policy as is gave our staff the latitude in which to practice in accordance with their school culture. Did I kind of grab that correctly, other monitor committee members? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was helpful too that we all have students actually in schools in the district, so that was helpful too, so we could all talk about our personal experience around that as well.
Thank you for that additional context. And Dr. Mary Perry Reed had mentioned that the elementary principals were talking about kind of this implementation piece. And I do see the policy in its current form as allowing for some of that thoughtful and careful implementation around the pledge. And so I understand why you brought the recommendation in front of us as such tonight. So appreciate the conversation. Anything else on this policy? Okay, so I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policies in first read, and that the board direct the administration to prepare the policies with no suggested revisions for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the above policies in first read. Any further discussion?
Actually, I do have one question that occurred to me. We have related to immunizations, and I just wanted to clarify to check my own understanding. The state of Minnesota, right, sets the requirements for immunizations and the types of immunizations that are required and the schedule upon which they're required. I know I personally have had a couple conversations with community members concerned and or supporting the inclusion of some of our more seasonal vaccines, and that's totally outside the purview of the board and the school district, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that important clarification. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you to our policy committee for your ongoing work. There is a lot of work when you're on the policy committee. I'm just going to say, I do miss it. I am envious. I do want to be back on the policy committee, but it is a lot of work, and we really appreciate your thoughtfulness and, of course, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, all of his input and context to help us make these decisions. So thank you very much. We will move to our next agenda item, which is the certification of the 2022 payable 2023 levy, and I will turn that over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and welcome to the table, Director Chapanduka. Earlier this evening at 6 p.m., we facilitated the Truth in Taxation hearing. Thank you, Director Chapanduka, for providing that very informative presentation. It was almost 45 minutes and did offer a lot of information for our taxpayers and community members. We had 2 public comments, so it was good to have folks in the space. On November 15, the board approved the proposed Pay 23 property tax levy. And so in front of the board this evening is approving the resolution establishing school district tax levies authorized for general and special purposes. And Director Chapanduka is here to lay that context for you.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Reed. Good evening, Chair Westmoreland, respective board members, and the community at large. Is alluded by the superintendent. In September 20th, we came to the board with a proposed tax levy, and at that point in time, we didn't have all the information, so we recommended that the board pre-approve the certification at maximum. And I know I've come back to the board a couple times with updates based on information we've been getting from Minnesota Department of Education. The numbers we are presenting today are the final numbers for our Pay 2023 levy, which amounts to $65.7 million, an increase of about 10.2% in comparison to what we actually received for property tax in 2022. Just for the benefit of community members who were not able to attend the Truth in Taxation presentation, I'll just give a few highlights here. So a 10.2% amount to about $6 million increase. And some of the increases are spread across 3 big components which make up our property tax levy. So the first component being the general fund, which increased by about 20.5% or $8.5 million. And most of these increases were actually tied to the operating referendum, to the capital projects levy, and I'll kind of get more into details, as well as our long-term facility maintenance. The second component was the community service fund, which had an overall increase of about 7.65%, amounting to about $108,000. The third component was the debt service fund, which actually had a decrease of about 15.5%, or $2.5 million. So if you mix these 3 components, some of the increases, some of the decreases, it just gives us an overall shift of about 10.2%, comparing payable 2022 to payable 2023. In terms of what those major changes are, again, the first component within the general fund is our voter-approved referendum, and we did a voter referendum in November of 2017. So the change in the voter-approved operating referendum was about $3.4 million positive. And the operating referendum is used for our operating costs. And this levy is based on voter approval as well as the district's tax base. So if the tax base increases, it also means that our operating referendum is also shifting positively. The second component within the general fund, which also saw a positive increase, is our general fund voter-approved capital projects technology referendum. It increased by 264,433, and this component or category is used to fund technological cost. Again, this is based on voter approval. Just like with the operating referendum, the capital projects slave also increases when our tax base, our net tax capacity increase, and our net tax capacity did increase. The third component is tied around our general and debt service funds, which is the long-term facility maintenance. There were a number of shifts within this category. There were some positive shift and some negative shift. There's the general fund component, which increased by about $4.5 million. This general fund component is what we define as pay-as-you-go. When we maintaining our assets, our buildings, there's a component of those expenditures which can be funded out of the general fund, which has an effect and impact on the property tax levy. That increased by about $4.5 million. And the other component is tied to our bond sales. So a component of our long-term facility maintenance is used through a bond sale to maintain our properties. And that piece went down because of the fact that we did have a refunding of the bond, which decreases our total debt to the district, meaning the principal and interest. So one component of that is the debt service, which is voter approved. That went down by about 342,212. And then the other component is the non-voter approved, which went down by $2.2 million. So in total, we had a reduction of about $2.5 million in our debt service, which is a positive to the district. So those were the major components which make up the majority of the shift in the tax levy. As we discussed previously, a 10.2% does not mean that there is going to be an increase of 10.2% to the property tax base. The 10.2% increase is only the difference between what was actually approved in our prior property tax levy and what we are proposing to the board based on net tax capacity, based on referendum market value of properties within the Hopkins boundaries, which is reaching commercial properties. I'll just give two examples in terms of what this 10.2% may mean for the Hopkins School District. Just knowing that there are other entities who are also contributing to the overall pie of property tax base within the district. Based on some estimated calculations, when we look at what a property owner paid in payable 2022 and the preliminary estimates of what a property owner would pay for a property owner who owns a residential property valued at about $250,000, That shift is about $17 or 1.7%. Same with a property owner who owns a residential property costing like $500,000. Between what they paid in payable 22, what they would pay in payable 23 is just an increase of about $33. If you move to commercial properties, the trend is the same. It's a slight increase for a property owner who owns commercial property valued at $250,000. They would see a slight increase of about $16 in comparison to what they paid in payable 22, which is about 1.5%. Same when you look at a commercial property costing $2 million, that will have an increase of about $114 or 1.2% increase. So in general, those are the trends of what we are seeing. Increase of 1 to 2.5% across different residential property values. So with that being said, the recommendation is for the board to approve the final certification of the 2022 payable 2023 fiscal year 24 property tax levy of $65,794,907. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Chapanduka, and we appreciate the information that you shared with our community, both during the workshop and during the Truth in Taxation hearing before this meeting. Wondering if my board colleagues have any questions or comments for Director Chapanduka.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Adams.
I have some comments related to this. I'm speaking in favor of this motion to increase the levy. As you can see from from Terrell's presentation and from the board packet, the increase of about $6 million is mostly made up of in addition to our pay-as-you-go plan, $4.5 million. And that means $4.5 million that we don't have to borrow in order to do our long-term facilities maintenance. So that saves us some money on the interest. Also, through creative refinancing, we reduced our debt service, we'll reduce our debt service in the coming year by $2.5 million. So that's, again, dollars that we don't have to pay out in interest and can put into the classroom or into capital projects. So in total, that's $7 million that we're saving by use of this levy. So I think it's a really it's a conservative and practical way to fund our projects. And I think it's, when you look at what the net effect is on property values, and I was concerned about mine, somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000, my increase is going to be about $26 to $33 a year. I think it's well worth it for that. So I recommend that we vote in favor of this.
Thank you very much, Director Adams. And yeah, so I think it can be really confusing to see 10.2% increase. I said this during the workshop too. Before I joined a school board, I really had no idea what I was looking at. I would just get my tax document and think, oh, okay. But now, obviously, thankfully, going into year 6, I understand a lot more about what goes into these decisions and then what that increase actually looks like for homeowners. And so I think putting a number to it that, what did you say, between $26 and $33 on your property?
Yeah.
Yeah. That
I can afford that.
Right, it's a very minimal increase for property owners. So thank you very much. Other questions or comments from the board?
I have an additional comment, and also will speak in favor of supporting this. And as a homeowner, definitely received my own sticker shock when receiving our property tax statements recently. But very much appreciate the reiteration that a 10.2% increase does not mean that this is single-handedly responsible for the increases that homeowners have seen across the board. But also, I wanted to speak to remind us of some comments that we've heard, I'm thinking specifically from Kevin Newman, but also related to other projects that we have received updates about during this kind of entire calendar year. And there have been many projects that have been undertaken to protect groundwater and to stay in compliance with cities so that we're not blocking streets and so that our buildings are safe and that our buildings are efficient both in human flow and utilizing natural gas and water and electricity efficiently. And I realize that that's kind of a hard budget line to look at, the increases, but we have to remember that deferring that maintenance and doing nothing is not free. And that we also have made these pledges to make some big changes in transitioning our 6th grade and our 9th grade. And so to fulfill on those promises and to make our places ready for our students and our staff, there's a lot of changes to go through with that. And unfortunately, I think the trades has been just so hard hit with the conditions of the last several years. And wanted to say that in favor of supporting this.
All excellent points. I think sometimes it's hard to remember all of the different things that we're responsible for just in terms of physical structure. So appreciate you calling out some of those specifics in support of this resolution. Any other questions or comments? With that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the resolution establishing school district tax levies authorized for general and special purposes.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Clerk Peterson for the roll call vote.
Excellent. Thanks.
Your fave.
Director Hartland.
Aye.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Chair Westmoreland.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Kahn.
Aye.
Director Ross.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye.
I heard 7 ayes and 0 nays, so that means the motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director Chapanduka, for all your work, both to prepare for tonight and tonight in real time. We appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll move on to our board member reports. Who'd like to kick us off?
Let me go before Steve, please.
All right.
Chair Westmoreland.
Way to jump in there.
Who's up?
Mine is not going to be as fascinating as Steve's famous oratory, but I had the pleasure this past Friday to meet with Principal Navidad over at Alice Smith. We had a very good conversation walking through everything that's going on in the building, being able to see, I'll be honest, I did not realize how many walls he was proudly, admitted that he was able to knock down. And then seeing the 4th and 5th grade combined class, we talked about what will that look like next year with the 6th graders moving on to West and to West for Alice Smith. What does that look like? And I know that they're researching, trying to do a combined 2 and 3 roles. So it was very good information. It was nice to meet some of the staff and be able to steal an hour out of Principal Navidad's day to kind of help me walk through because I have the pleasure of having children at Tangleton, so I kind of have a better sense of, how things operate over at Tangleton. But it was just nice to get out and meet a different principal, get an understanding of the building structure and how it worked. And again, it was interesting seeing kind of those glass doors that I was just like, wow, this is in an elementary building and not at a college campus. So yeah, that was report that I want to put forth, and look forward to some future meetings, probably post-holiday, with different staff and different principals as well in different buildings.
Thank you very much, Director Ross. Yeah, that's wonderful. Great to be getting into the schools and seeing what's going on and understanding. And Principal Navidad is also like a very fun person to talk to because he's so passionate and excited about what's happening in his schools. So I would imagine you had a great time.
Yeah, and learning about Juntos as well, and that seems to be another passion project as well on his plate, that he would love to, increase those numbers and increase, obviously, staff sizing on that as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Who's going to jump in next?
Oh, I will.
Oh, my gosh.
After our last board meeting, I think it was actually the following day, Catherine Callahan and I from the Legislative Action Coalition had a student meeting via Zoom with students who are going to be assisting us with our legislative breakfast this year. So they're in the process of putting together some videos that we will hopefully show at the district, at the breakfast. And I think they're going to spend much of their winter break working on those. So let's hope. Oh, and then I also attended that same day something called the Leading for the Future meeting. This is a cohort that was created by KnowledgeWorks, who has done some work for us in the district. But they have gotten a couple different cohorts together of school board leaders across the state. And it's always interesting to get the observations and share some of the commonalities with other school board members, especially outside the Twin Cities. So, we've got people in our cohort that are from Anoka Hennepin, but also from Welcome, Lake Crystal, Welcome. I can't remember all the hyphenated names of these districts, but it's always interesting to find out how much we have in common and also the particular differences that we have. And then on Friday the 18th, I subbed for our esteemed superintendent at the AMSD Legislative Committee meeting, which I was a part of when I was chair of the AMSD several years ago. And it's always interesting to go back and participate in those conversations about what should be our priorities at the legislature this year. So we had a long discussion about their platform and approved it, and it was subsequently approved at the general board meeting on December 2nd. And speaking of December 2nd AMSD meeting, there was a presentation by KnowledgeWorks there on competency-based instruction, and trying to focus on what are the legislative issues that stand in the way of us doing competency-based instruction, and what can we do to address those in the coming session. So it was an interesting presentation, and some war stories about other states that are doing it, other school districts that are doing it, and hopefully we'll have a smoother path after this year's legislative session. And also that evening, I attended the MSBA Delegate Assembly over at the Doubletree Hotel. The kickoff presentation was by Peter Leatherman, whom I think has spoken to our board before. He presented on the results of the survey that the Morris Leatherman group did back in August, and in a more recent updated one too, on public attitudes about education in particular. And some of it was reassuring and some of it was depressing, so that always seems to come out in their surveys. Also at that delegate assembly, they debuted a new app that they have created, paid to have created, It's very similar to the one that's being used by the National School Boards Association, which very easily allows anyone to get a notification on their phone, fill in some minimal information, and for whatever topic it might be about, send that message to your legislator or congressperson and let them know how you're feeling about that. And I was glad to see that, because I thought the National School Boards app has been very effective in getting some attention of Congress, and now we've got a similar tool to use here in the state. And then the following day, we considered 18 different resolutions at the delegate assembly. And I attended with our vice chair, Shannon Andreessen. I'll let her fill you in on
Oh, really?
how that went.
Relying on you to
No, can't pass the buck.
Well, I think it went relatively well. There weren't, I was excited. This was actually my first delegate assembly in person, and got to actually see a lot of the school board members across the state that I've been working with, but only know as little squares on a screen. So that was exciting. I thought there would be more robust discussion about some of the resolutions. I was surprised. But yeah, some interesting ones. Of course, school nutrition wasn't on there because that happened last year, so. Yeah, anything else?
Well, the voting, we had to go to old-style voting.
Oh, right, because the little clickers didn't work.
Yeah, their automated voting equipment did not operate properly. Out of, I think, 100 delegates, the first time we tested it, only 8 of them worked. So we went to a hand count, or a voice vote, so
Wow,
that's old school.
very.
And I would encourage anyone to go to the MSBA website and just look at what resolutions were passed. They certainly aren't going to inform every advocacy thing that MSBA does, but perhaps there are some important pieces of legislation that might come from it, so.
Yeah.
Should I continue?
Yeah, you're on a roll.
I just wanted to update everyone in our community and around the board table that the campaign for Resource West Give to the Max Day was very successful, and it targeted providing more preschool scholarships to Hopkins schools families. And the giving from our community was generous. So this was a partnership in providing essential childcare to families who otherwise would not be able to access our district services. And now with the donations received, lots more families will move off the waiting list and into high-quality childcare at Hopkins schools. So I wanted to thank everyone that participated in that campaign, and really just express gratitude for the partnership between Resource West and Hopkins Public Schools, as well as the very skillful fundraising messaging that went out that allowed this to happen for our families.
I believe they raised more than twice as much money as they had hoped to.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
So
Yeah,
that was,
yeah, it was really great, and money is still coming in. People really responded to that specific ask,
Great.
so very
Shannon,
grateful.
are you still on the Resource West board?
Yes,
Wonderful.
yeah, as well as Sarah Chauvin, so
Excellent.
she was thrilled.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I have a brief summary as to what I've been up to. I have a friend who works in our Hopkins Adult Options in Education program for Hopkins specifically, even though they are partnered with Hopkins, Minnetonka, St. Louis Park, and Wayzata. And she specifically does ABE and GED and college prep for her classroom. So her students were online, and she had specifically been teaching a book about about Malala. So the title of the book was called I Am Malala. Malala and I share the same cultural heritage of Pakistan. So specifically, I'm from my background is more from the northern area of Pakistan, but I was able to do a brief presentation on Pakistan, and I was able to answer a lot of questions regarding the book that students had about Malala's and how people view her abroad and here. So that was really interesting, and it was really great to see how many, there were quite a lot of students in our adult options programs, and how wonderful it is that these adults are going back to school and able to get a great degree from Hopkins, even as adults. So I really appreciate that program, and I don't know very much about it, but because of my friend Jean, who's teaching this class, I've been able to learn a lot. So it's great that Hopkins does that. And that's my report.
It's wonderful, thank you.
I do have a report.
Great.
In addition to the musical events listed in the superintendent's report earlier, North Junior High's band concert is on Thursday, the 15th at 7 p.m. at the high school, and I have a student in that, and I'm excited about it. With regard to robotics, the Junior High's Robotics First Tech Challenge team, the first one that we've had in a couple of years at this level, I believe, due to COVID, had their competition this past Saturday at Maple Grove High School and placed 6th overall out of 20-some Minnesota teams, and then 4th in the final. And they were a very young team who had no one on the team had ever been part of robotics at this level in the past several years. And other teams sometimes have had a team in the previous years and can build on what they have done before. So this is a brand new team, and it was coached by Annika Berman, so a recent Hopkins High grad and the Technocrats team captain for a couple of years, and she did a fantastic job with these junior high kids, and without her efforts and her father, Mark's, there would not have been this opportunity. This was a joint team for the North and West junior highs. And so then they had a great showing at their competition, and I believe the high school's competition is this Saturday at 10, and then the 2 of the Meadowbrook Elementary Lego League Challenge teams have their competition this Saturday in Victoria. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but there's actually 5, at Meadowbrook alone, there's 5 Lego League teams. There's 3 different levels for different age groups, and there are 5 at Meadowbrook alone, and I assume more at other elementary schools. And so I just want to thank all of the coaches and the parent volunteers, and then of course the students who took their own time and resources to foster these really important and future-facing skills in our students.
Rachel, is Annika Berman related to Elliot Berman? He was our former student board representative. So I was just curious.
Possibly, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so I don't know that for sure.
Curious, yeah.
But she was
feel like yes.
Yeah, because they're so talented. Like, what do they not do?
very talented.
You know?
Yes. So I don't know
Yeah.
if she's on here, or if she ever would hear this. But and then I attended the high school's production of Legally Blonde right before our Thanksgiving break, and they were a little bit battered by the flu and some other respiratory viruses, but the entire cast really rallied and stepped up, and they had understudies involved, and it was a very enjoyable presentation and really well attended. And I also am part of the group that's meeting with students to prep for a January 20th legislators breakfast that we are going to host. So we're going to have our actual Minnesota legislators that represent the Hopkins district come to a breakfast and use our own, we're not having that catered outside, we're going to use Hopkins nutrition department's meals and show the legislators kind of a day at West. And we are a bunch of high school students, or several high school students are stepping up to help us make a video. And if any of those students are watching, I'm still working on getting parent contacts. I haven't forgotten. And I personally, we have done this legislators breakfast in video format the last couple of years, but we're going to do it in person this year at West, and I'm very excited about that.
Wonderful, thank you. So many great updates. So I wanted to begin my board report by talking about some work that I've been doing with Hennepin County. So I mentioned a few meetings ago that I was asked to join the Heading Home Hennepin Executive Committee, which is a joint powers table to address homelessness in Hennepin County. And specifically, what we looked at our last meeting was housing stock and how to shore up the funding gaps that come into play when we are trying to create more affordable housing. And so the whole theme of the meeting was brick and mortar. And as somebody who has been involved in advocacy around affordable housing since about 2015, I knew some of these things, and I learned just a ton from the expertise in the room. So I was asked to bring a public school perspective to that group. I'm kind of in my learning curve right now to really understand what the group is about and how we can best provide information to them, both from our district and then in partnership with school board members from other districts, about really what is needed to ensure that our students have safe and stable places to live. We know that is a basic human right, and so we want to advocate for that for our students. We also know that it is a predictor in a student's ability to thrive and be successful in all aspects of their school experience. So that is a really unique group to be a part of, and I will continue to share out my learnings from that group and let you know kind of the information that I'm bringing to them to advocate on behalf of our public schools. I was also recently asked to bring a public schools perspective to the transition team for the newly elected Hennepin County Attorney, Mary Moriarty. She has identified as a priority partnering with public schools to prevent youth from entering the criminal legal system, and for youth who are in the system, providing them with robust support through a trauma-informed lens. So I've been speaking with school leaders here in Hopkins and staff, specifically about the Be at School program, which is one of the main ways that we intersect as a district with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, as well as other factors that she should be taking into consideration as she prepares to transition to this role. So I'm one of two school board members who are part of the transition team. There are a lot of legal experts in that transition team, so I have certainly been learning a lot from that group as well, and it's very exciting to be part of a new and data-informed model for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office that includes meaningful collaboration between that office and public schools so that we can effectively disrupt and abolish the school-to-prison pipeline. I will be presenting at the MSBA conference. Tamara Grady, who's a school board member in Osseo, invited me to join just like a fantastic group of people from Osseo. So I was looking at the presenters, and I'm the only non-Osseo person, so I just feel like really honored to be invited to present with that group. And it's a panel about supporting LGBTQ+ students in schools. So talking about some of the steps we've taken as a board, things that are happening throughout our district, and areas where we really know that we still need improvement. So along those lines, I did want to just recognize publicly the impact that the Club Q shooting had on members of our Hopkins schools community. Just acknowledging that this violent attack comes on top of the daily psychological and physical violence that so many LGBTQ+ community members face. And we see manifestations of this everywhere. They include attempts at restricting the rights of trans youth and adults through legislative action, homophobic and transphobic comments on social media and at public meetings, queer youth who do not feel safe at home or in their communities, inconsistent or non-existent inclusive bathroom access in schools, and this is an issue that we are still grappling with here in Hopkins schools, misgendering, and inaccurate or harmful assumptions about what queer people look like, how we act, how we are capable of doing our jobs, leading, parenting, learning, and being in community. So with that, I state that I'm a proud queer parent of a queer kid, and there are many of us, LGBTQ+ community members and allies, who are actively working to make our schools more inclusive and safer. And this includes our student board representatives who have spoken about these topics at the table, our QSAs, Queer Straight Alliances, and GSAs, Gender Sexuality Alliances in our schools, so many of our staff, parents and caregivers, several of whom I had an email exchange with today about the need for more consistent bathroom access for our trans and gender expansive students, specifically at our high school. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the Hopkins staff who work so hard to create inclusive spaces for our LGBTQ+ students, who held space for students to process the Club Q shooting, and who do this work constantly and are rarely recognized for it in a public way. And I want to acknowledge our LGBTQ+ students and thank you for being in community with us, and say to you that you being you, however you show up on any given day in our spaces is more than enough, and that you are valued, and it is absolutely our responsibility as adults to act to ensure that you have what you need to thrive in all of our spaces in Hopkins Public Schools. So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? There never is. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:33 p.m.